Hello there! Welcome to the Siege of Orgrimmar Flex Guide. My name is Tuskeh, and today we will be discussing Wing 2 of the Siege of Orgrimmar, the Gates of Retribution. We'll be covering everything you need to pull your weight in a flex run, be it a pickup group or a guild run. Now, just to clarify, this guide assumes that you already know the basic LFR level abilities of each boss. If you don't, click the annotation on screen now to go to this wing's LFR guide. Once you're caught up, we'll talk flex, the differences it has from LFR, and how to prepare. Now, let's get started. We'll start with an item level requirement. While this is a point of some debate, my personal suggestion is that the tanks of the raid should have between a 530 or 540 or higher item level, the DPS 520 and the healers 530. Without a doubt, every member of the raid needs to be gemmed and enchanted. Legendary cloaks and major gems from the legendary questline are a great addition if you can get them. Don't be lazy with your legendary quest. If you're in mostly time missile gear, again I'd suggest not running flex at this point. Try running Throne of Thunder looking for raid, as the gear is a little better designed even if the item level is a bit lower. Of course, run Siege of Orgrimmar looking for raid. Additionally, if you can get into a normal Throne of Thunder run, then you can gear up much easier. If you're aiming to run this wing with a pickup group, you hopefully shouldn't have too much trouble. You can use the in-game raid finder to find or start a group, and there are online sources like OpenRaid and in-game add-ons like OQ to help you with finding a group. You can find links to these in the description. With a group of 10, I'd suggest going for 3 healers, 2 tanks and 5 DPS. When you're at about 15 raid members, you'll want another healer and another near 20. Finally, you'll want to go up to 6 healers with a full 25-man group. Having 3 tanks for this wing is useful, but not necessary on all of the bosses and not necessary at all on the first. If you're a DPSer, you should be capable of putting out a complete minimum of 110 to 120,000 sustained DPS, so after 5 minutes or so on a training dummy. If everyone is at this level, the group will probably struggle a little bit, but if you're going into a pickup group, it'll be practically impossible to tell what everyone's DPS is going to be. Having an average DPS of about 160k will be more than enough for a group to succeed. You can generally tell how well you'll do on the first couple of trash pulls. The trash up to the first boss is exactly like it is in LFR. Use the cannons, tanks don't overpull, then destroy the cannons with the mines. Go back to the harbour and on to Galakras. For this boss, you'll want a dedicated tower team. You want 1 tank, 1 healer and a couple of good DPSs. If you're in a larger flex group, consider going up to 4 or 5 DPSs and maybe another healer. A bit of experimentation here is always good, and make sure you communicate with your raid to see what their suggestions are. Now, Galakras is exactly like he is in LFR. Everything is just nastier. Make sure you tank the trash. DPSs downstairs always kill the healing tide totems and the war banners. Keep the tidal shaman interrupted when they use chain heal, and make sure to interrupt the bone crusher's fracture on the friendly NPCs. It's going to hurt a lot more in flex, and if one of the friendly NPCs dies, the encounter is over. As a note for the tower team, the second tower's mini-boss will hit like a truck, so make sure you have heavy cooldowns ready. If your tank dies in the tower and the tower team wipes, unless you can get the tank up with a battle res, then you're going to have to start the fight again. Coordinate when you shoot Galakras down. A great time to shoot him down is when an ad wave is about 5 or 6 seconds away, as this gives the raid maximum time to get the ads down before the boss arrives. You should be using DBM or bigwigs or something like that to track these kind of abilities. Once Galakras is shot down, Bloodlust and make sure you stack up. A marker is great for this, and just do him as you do in LFR. Just note that the raid damage will be very high, so make sure you use everything you have as a healer to keep the raid healthy, and everyone, use your survivability cooldowns to keep yourself alive. There's no trash up to the Iron Juggernaut, which is probably the nastiest fight in this wing. He's a pretty hefty gear check, which means you'll want to make sure you don't have anyone that can't pull their weight in the group, and if you do, try to balance it out with some really higher geared players that can pick up the slack. The Iron Juggernaut has to be done pretty well in order for your raid to succeed. Healers, make sure you watch the tank's health even when they're not tanking, as the dot from the Juggernaut's debuff is very hard hitting. Combined with the damage from jumping on a mine, they can get very low very fast. A nice tactic to use here is to have 3 tanks, not only to split the damage from the tank debuff a little bit more, but also to have 2 tanks jumping on mines at any one time. This is a great way to avoid any mines going off, as one tank can struggle without quick reflexes or strong movement abilities. As a note, warrior tanks are awesome on this fight, with heroic leap, charge and intervene to get them from one mine into the air and down to the next one nice and fast. If you don't have 3 tanks, then DPSers, you can pop heavy survival cooldowns and jump on the mines. You'll want at least 60% damage reduction to survive jumping on them, and if you have the raid damage dot on you, don't do it at all because you're probably gonna die. In Phase 2, everyone must make sure they don't get knocked away from the fight. If a healer is knocked away from the raid, it can easily result in a wipe, because the raid damage is pretty high here. If you have any personal survival cooldowns, shock pulses are the time to use them because everyone is going to be flying everywhere. Tanks, continue jumping on mines. Don't ever kite a laser beam into the tar pools because the resulting damage can wipe the raid. Rinse and repeat the fight like this. If you can get this guy down, you have the team to defeat this wing. Onto the astronomical amount of trash. Pull at a reasonable pace, but not ever more than 2 groups at once. Everything will hit harder. Beware of patrols. Everything can be stunned, so make sure you do so. Make sure to stun and interrupt the shadow mages as their spells hit really hard. They take priority over any of the other trash in here. Make sure to clear the valley and then reset the boss if you can. Now, the Dark Shaman are just like they are on Looking for Raid. Everything is going to hit much harder and everyone needs to be on their toes. Standing in stuff is bad. As a note, the lines of adds made by Harom's Ash ability at 50% health will do insane damage to whoever they hit, so avoid going through them to get where you need to go or you're going to die. Avoid toxic storms and the whirlwinds they make. Never stand in foul stream and try to be intelligent with where you place it. Remember that the stream starts at the boss and is aimed at you, so if you can get it away from the raid by moving through the boss, then do so. This will probably give you lots of cred with your raid. There'll be plenty of raid damage here, and the tanks will probably spike a lot. If you're struggling here, there is another tactic you can use with 3 tanks. Split the raid into 2 teams. Have a group of 2 tanks, and most of the healers go into Garrosh's throne room, where you're going to tank Harom. The other tank, the last few healers, and the DPSs will stay outside. This technique avoids the ashen walls entirely. Since they're aimed at the tank and will appear directly on top of him, you can position yourself so that each line appears in one of the alcoves of the room, whereupon you move to the next, and move around the room in a slow circle. This will drastically reduce raid damage and allow players outside more space, but it will also increase the time it will take to kill the bosses. You'll probably want some strong DPS for this technique. Regardless of your technique, Bloodlust when they do at 25% health and nuke them down. Once the Dark Shaman are dead, move on to the trash up to Nazgrim. Just as before, 2 Blind Blade Masters, mount up and move as a team, aggro the Demolishers regardless of role to stop them from bombarding the raid, jump down into Ragefire Chasm, interrupt the Arcweavers, don't turn away from the Assassins or you'll die, gather the War Shaman into a group with 1 tank, and have the other tank taunt 1 Shaman out and away from the group, then have the DPSs nuke it, repeat, and then stun, slow and kill the Iron Blades. Also, reset Nazgrim's adds if you want to. Nazgrim doesn't have any new mechanics in Flex, but he will require more coordination. Make sure you're on top of all of his mechanics. Tanks, swap at 4 stacks, kill his war banners, avoid his heroic shockwave, raid heal when Warsong comes in, defensive cooldowns help a lot here, and avoid Ravagers. The adds take priority, in this order. War Shaman Totems, the War Shaman themselves, Arcweavers, Assassins, Iron Blades. Make sure you control every add as much as you can with roots, stuns and slows. Interrupt anything you can. Priority goes to the chain heal from the War Shaman and the Magistrike from the Arcweavers. Never hit him during defensive stance unless you're burning him. When you decide to burn Nazgrim is up to you. Generally, you're going to want to do so when he's at about 15 to 20% health, and if your timing is good, during a Berserker stance, where he'll take extra damage. Make sure your raid coordinates and that you know when to nuke him down and when not to. Feel free to wait through a defensive stance with the DPSs doing nothing but killing adds. Unless your DPS is really low, which it shouldn't be if they're the same DPSs that kill the Iron Juggernaut, then the Berserk timer won't be an issue. When Nazgrim hits 10%, make sure to control the adds as much as you can. Don't let any War Shaman near him. Finally, there is a technique with 3 tanks here. Have 2 tanks on the boss and 1 tank on the adds. The War Shaman in particular hit very hard if they're not kited, so having a 3rd tank can really help control the fight much easier. This is great when you're burning him, as the 3rd tank can pick up the extra adds and move them out of healing range so that Nazgrim won't get healed during the last moment. Thanks for watching this guide. I hope you found it informative. If you have any comments, suggestions, feedback or thoughts, make sure to like, dislike and leave a comment. Additionally, make sure you subscribe to catch these guides as soon as they come out. Best of luck with your loot!